We might just mention that Ralph is
Yeah.
on the phone, so there are 4 of us.
Typically for, we should have sent you this section of code for a meeting where somebody joins electronically would take a roll call.
Oh, okay.
So everybody knows who's on the meeting and for the record as well.
Okay. So let's call the meeting to order, and we'll do a roll call attendance. And Genevieve Baker, Vice Chair.
Ann Anderson.
Hunter Huffman. And Ralph, I think that's
Ralph,
right.
can you hear us?
Joining us on the phone.
He was there a minute ago.
Yeah, he was.
Ralph, can you hear us still?
Maybe, maybe not.
Ralph?
Ralph, was that you talking, or was that just background noise?
Is he calling
Got
back?
disconnected.
Looks like he's calling back in.
Ralph, are you there?
Yeah, we're here, sorry.
Okay. We're just doing a roll call attendance, and if you could just state your name. Okay. First, first item is the approval of the agenda. A motion.
Motion to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Josh, do we need to do roll call votes since he's on a call? Okay.
I don't know specifically based on the code, but it would be really good just to be
Okay.
clear.
So, Genevieve Baker, aye.
Ann Anderson, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
Ralph Calder, aye.
All right. And we have, the next item is the approval of the minutes from September 24th, 2024. And is there any other changes that haven't already been communicated to staff?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a second and a motion. All in favor? Well, we'll do a roll call. Ralph, why don't you start?
Ralph Calder, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
Ann Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. All right, so today we have nothing on the administrative legislative session. We have a presentation for Springville Public Works in adoption of the pressurized irrigation water master plan, impact fees, facilities plan, and impact fee analysis, as well as the plan for drinking water. Are they going to be presented together, Brad? Okay. All right. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. This presentation has been given to the utility board already.
If you could just state your full name.
Oh, am I supposed to do that here? Okay. My name's Brad Stapley. I'm the Public Works Director for Springville City. I've been here about 20 years. So we've given this presentation to the utility board, and they've recommended, at the end, we'll ask for a recommendation from you, also from the Planning Commission. We've also talked with the City Council and given them an overview of what we're looking at. The intent here is to go forward eventually with all the different master plans. So I'll be coming and talking to you again for other master plans. But each one of those has an impact fee associated with it. And we're going to bring those as a package to the City Council. But tonight we'll be giving you a basic overview of all the different master plans and where those impact fees fall in that. Does that make sense? It'll be towards the end of the presentation. So tonight we're talking about the drinking water master plan. And to understand this, you've got to realize that it's a study of the drinking water system and the customer water use. And that's critical to understand. And that is that basically cities use water differently. And so how we set up our city and how we make sure our pipelines are the right size and our storage tanks and our sources and all that is based on how we actually use water today, because that's how we project forward what we're going to be doing in the future. And so one of the first things we do in master plans is we establish that level of service. That's critical. In fact, that's one of the most important things in the master plan is what's your level of service. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Then we project demands and forecast estimated growth. We got to know how much we're going to grow so we can plan ahead with our sources and so forth. And then we look at our assets. Now this picture here is just an example. This is one of our tanks. This is tank number 1 of a 3-tank system that's up at the top of 4 South. This tank was built in 1933, so do the math.
Wow.
It's 91 years old. And here, the issue with this, for example, is in the master plan it says with all of our assets right now, with all the tanks that we have, we were just talking about tanks, we don't have to build another tank until 2035. But if we take this tank out of service, that's 91 years old, we have to build another tank in 2026. So we put a couple $100,000 into this 91-year-old tank and put it back into service. So it doesn't matter how old something is, at least in the water system, we keep it as best we can and we use it as long as we can. And the tank is still in really good condition. We know it's from 1933 because we actually uncovered a stencil about this size, and it had that stencil of 1933, so it was pretty cool. So we quantify our system assets. That's not just tanks, it's all of our pipelines, everything. And then we've got to verify we have enough water rights. Do we have enough water rights to run our system today and to grow? That's very critical. And then from that, we run a hydraulic model. A hydraulic model based on how we are today that helps us to see if we have any deficiencies in our system and how we're going to be in the future. Okay? So let's go through. Once we do that, we formulate capital projects. What are the things we need to do? What kind of projects to fix deficiencies in the system? And based on growth and anticipated development, what are we going to need to build in the future? So this is actually the bottom of tank number 3 that we just built. I'm almost standing next to tank 1, but this is what we built a couple years ago, and you may have seen that in the process of it being constructed. And that was a 3 million gallon tank. So this is kind of why we do master plans, and this is what we're going to be looking at in this presentation, is these different areas. So first looking at the drinking water master plan. So our drinking water system is pretty cool. And we go all the way up Bartholomew Canyon, where we have springs up there. We have a tank all the way up there at the canyon. It's only a dirt road to it. We bring it all the way down the canyon. So we have springs and wells in various parts of the community. Do you know where I'm talking about, Bartholomew?
Yeah.
It's the backside of Provo Peak. So it's quite a ways back east
Yeah.
and back north again, okay?
So is that on county property then, or whose property?
It's in Forest Service property,
Service.
actually,
Forest
yeah.
Service.
And so when we look at our drinking water system, we have about 190 miles of pipe. Pretty cool, huh? A lot of miles.
A lot of money.
And anywhere from 4 to 30 inches in diameter. We have 7 different wells and 7 different springs. Our lowest spring is actually by Bartholomew Pond. It's called Burt Spring. Okay. There's actually one there's a little bit lower. It's called Canote Spring. It's actually an old mine shaft that has water that comes out. And so we have 9 tanks and 2 pump stations. Now I want to talk about tanks for just a second. Tanks do not store water. Think about that. Tanks take the peaks off of daily use. So when everybody comes home at night and turns on the dishwasher or takes a shower or even at night when they water their lawns on this side where there's no PI, the tanks take those pinks off the higher flows. So when you think about storage, we don't store water for long periods of time. We store it for more or less a day, maybe 2 to 3 days. So tanks take the peaks off of the use. We have 2 pump stations. We can actually move water from Springville all the way back up the canyon to Rotary. So we can move water around pretty good too. And because we live on kind of a hillside, we have 11 different pressure zones. The further below a tank you get in elevation, the higher the pressure. It's kind of like when you dive in a pool, the further down you go, the more pressure. Same thing, okay? So establishing the level of service, this is so critical. Existing water demands are calculated using our Springville billed water use, how we actually use water, and also how we actually produce water. That's how we get the footprint of how much water we need, and how much, based on that, as we grow, how much more we're going to need. And so we set that up to something we call an equivalent residential connection. And we found, based on just looking at winter use, when you're not watering outside, that a single-family residence uses about 62,800 gallons of water a year. And they're irrigating outside about 0.15 irrigated acres of outdoor water use. What that means is that in our area, the basic demand for water is about 4 feet deep of water per acre. We're using 0.15. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of a weird thing, but so on the east side, most of the water use in the summer is used on your lawns, not in your house. Okay? And so what we do is we set up basic levels of service, and we have what we call peaking factors to where, and that's what I talked about where tanks come in, is we have a basic flow, but then when people come home or when they leave in the morning, when they're getting ready to go to work, we have those peaking factors. And so these levels of service here that you're seeing are critical to establishing how much water we need, when and where, okay? And these values meet state drinking water, Division of Drinking Water standards. So what I'm saying is the typical use in Springville, our community, we're pretty much normal to everybody else. If we used 5 times the amount of outdoor water, the state would look at us and go, you need to change some things, right? So they're looking at how much based on our uses. And then you get even deeper into the level of service, and we start looking at fire flow. For example, what I was talking about in storage here, can you see my mouse moving around? Is just looking at storage. Equalization storage is what the tanks circulate going up and down every night, right? And then you have emergency storage, which is in case we have a water main break, and so we don't lose water. We have extra water to lose when we have a break. And then fire suppression, we have a fire. And so you put all those together and you find out this is what we're going to need for existing requirements and then what we need in 2060. And so each one of those areas, whether it's source, where we're getting our water from, or where we're putting it out in the distribution system. So again, these are those level of services that we set up to make sure that we have enough water at the right time in the right places. So let's talk about projected demands and forecasted estimated growth. Future water demands are predicted using the existing demands we have now and projecting forward and linking that with the zoning. What's the zoning happening out in the areas, right? What kind of densities are we going to have? And we also look at our future population growth to make sure that we're right on that. And that allows us to project forward. So for example, we also quantify our system assets, sources in our wells and springs. Do we have enough water that we pull out of our wells or out of our springs? For example, right now, our available flow, if you look at this column when we add up all the different springs and then the different wells, we have about 17,000 gallon per minute that we can produce. And based on our demand of 13,000, our existing demand, so we have about 3,663 gallons per minute that we can produce more than what the people are demanding today. What that means is, for example, that our highest producing well at 4 South right here, 4 South well number 2, we could lose that well and still make it through our peak day. Fairly close. Do you see what I'm saying? We call that an N-1. You probably heard that in power, right? To where you can lose one of your assets and still move forward. Storage tanks, same thing. These are all the different tanks we have and how much capacity they have. We have about 15.65 million gallons that we store in those tanks, right? And we have about 2 million gallons extra after you look at the different fire and emergency and equalization storages. So if you add this, plus this, you're going to get 13.69 is what we need for the demand, and we have about 2 million gallons extra. Okay, so we're okay on our water tanks. This comes back to that 1933 tank. If we lose that tank in a couple of years, we'd have to build another one. We went back through and made sure that it was okay, put it back in service. It was just an inspection. We just looked at it, fixed it up, put it back in service. We got lots more years left in it. So that gives you an example there. We have about 190 miles of pipelines. These are different sizes, 4-inch diameter, mostly 8-inch diameter pipes. Most of the 4-inch are in Plat A, this older area of town. Some are over 100 years old, some of our pipes, and they're functioning very well. So then we need to go through and verify that we have enough water rights, because water in Utah is like gold. And so right now we have, we will need about 13,350 acre feet in 2060. And it looks to me like we've got about 15,831, so we're okay there. We have a potential for other. We can put some things we move them like either shares or water rights that we have that we can also move into, what we call move them into wells. So we change the point of diversion with the state. So we've got some extra there. So then we go further and we look at, once we've run that model on our existing system, we say, well, where do we have problems for fire flow? Where do we have issues that might be to where a pipeline either isn't big enough, well, usually isn't big enough, to where we can't get enough water through to get through a hydrant to get it out to a house. And so we've gone through, and on the east side of town, so we're talking at this, where the railroad tracks are, both west, east side of town, in the older areas of town, and in newer areas they're developed, we want at least 1,000 gallons per minute. On the west side, we have a different standard to where we do about 1,500 gallons per minute because it's newer and we have the bigger pipes. We don't have the smaller pipes that we have, the older pipes on the east side. And then also in the non-residential, which would be your commercial areas, like Smith's and so forth, we're looking at 2,000 gallons per minute that we would need to get. So what you see here is a list of the different projects that we would need to do to bring areas of deficiency up. Now, we'll talk more about this, and I'll show you a map in just a second where these are. There's really not that many. We also have what we call non-residential that are more in the industrial areas where we want more than 2,000 gallons per minute, and we have some of those that are also deficient. So this map right here that you'll see, and it's the pink areas where we have issues that we might have fire flow issues. And there's not very many of them. And what we do is we work those into our capital project to make sure that we can go in, either change the pipe diameter or fix whatever it is that's causing it to where we're not getting the fire flow that we need. We're going to be looking at this project right here, Project 23, and these are future projects. So as we grow, where do we have areas that we would need to change something? And so let's look at that. So when we look at capital projects, there may be some that are associated with deficiencies. So these aren't fire flow issues. So we're not getting enough water to an area. And so in Center Street, for example, we've got this pipeline. It's about $500,000, and it's a 16-inch pipe that we need to construct. But building that 16-inch pipe actually gives us more capacity than what we need. But the rest of that is going towards development. And so some of that cost would go to development. So this $160,000, because when we build that project, Project 23 here, and let's go back. When we build that, there's going to be extra that we could use in the future out in this area. So that's where we can take that extra capacity and put that towards an impact fee. So just remember that part. Does that make sense what we're doing here? Same thing goes with the well. Eventually, we're going to need to drill another well as we grow and get bigger. But in this case, because we have enough wells right now, source capacity, this would be all to development. So you're seeing that impact fee eligible is 100%. So all of that cost would go to impact fees. So we start looking at distribution costs of pipelines, source costs like wells. City pays for the part it needs, development pays for the part it needs, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later too. So as you can see, there's various places where we have future development. They may have a component of growth in it, and they may not, and we have the fire flow. So any questions so far on what we're doing on this? Clear as mud?
I did have one question as far as one of the things you were mentioning was some of the projections that you're doing is in relation to the zoning that's proposed or that's what's going to be built. But you also mentioned that most of our water analysis has been tied to the usage of land and how it's watering lawns for the majority of the time.
No,
As
not just lawns, also indoor use.
Right. But the majority of the use is during the peak months of summer,
Right.
when people are doing their lawns and irrigation that way. As we say with Lakeside Landing, with the different zoning and everything that happens there, it's a different density
Yes.
for the zoning, but the greater the density doesn't necessarily mean the greater the lawn.
Right, we'll
necessarily.
talk about that later in the presentation.
Yeah, so that's the question. I guess
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
wait.
get to that point, yeah.
Okay.
Good question, though, very good. So, just looking at the culinary pipes, and this is extremely high level looking at it, based on all those 190 miles of pipe that we have, we're looking at 129 million-ish of, if we had to replace all those pipes at the same time. We don't have to do that, luckily, right? And pipes, this is based on 50-year annual replacement, right? So we're replacing every pipe, but we have pipes that are older than that. And so what we do is we actually have separated the pipes into the decades that they've been built. And we're finding, for example, that 1930s and part of 40s last longer than 50s and 60s. And then we've got lots of plastic pipe that's new. So we look at areas, so even though it's looking like we need $2.6 million a year, we're still going through and getting more granular and looking at and placing that into a 20-year plan. So this has nothing to do with impact fees. This has just our repair and replacement of our existing system. So what I'm saying is that we do look at the pipes, we look at break histories. An example was we have a main pipeline that goes out SR 75, 1400 north, goes out towards Nestle. And that was in an area of what we call hot soils. They're corrosive. And the ductile iron pipe that was out there was it was falling apart. So we went through and replaced, 1.5 miles, 2 miles of pipe. And so that pipe that we put in now is going to last, a long time. So we're doing things like that. We are replacing pipes and going through. Eventually, we'll need to do Plat A, right, because it's very old pipe. But we'll coordinate that with other projects, like maybe bringing PI to Plat A, or when we have to do the roadways, redo the roadways, so we're not tearing up new roads and so forth. So all that's coordinated in a long-term plan. So any questions on the culinary water? Very high level, looking at it, because now we're going to look at pressurized irrigation. Keep going. Same thing. Levels of service. Equivalent residential connection, we talked about 0.185 acres, irrigated acres. We'll talk a little bit more, I think we've got it in the slide here, but again, we're looking at the demand and so forth as we set that. Key system criteria, one of the things is we look at, and let's just look at sources and storage. And so we go through there and we look at these. We have a lot of vacant land out there, right? And how do we say what's going to be there? So we look at the zoning. For example, at agricultural, we're looking at mixed use, kind of like what you're hearing at Lakeside, right? There's a lot of mixed use in there along the main roadways, and then you have multifamily. They use less irrigated water, right? But they use more indoor water because they're stacked on top of each other in 2 or 3 story level things. So we look at that also. And then we look again at growth. How's it gonna grow? So we have growth tables that brings us through that. So then we look at, again, we're quantifying the assets. What do we have for surface waters now that we can put into our PI system? We have Hobble Creek and we have Strawberry Reservoir. So we can actually bring water through the Centrita Water Conservancy District pipeline all the way from Strawberry over to us here and get that into our PI system. Bartholomew Pond is our reservoir. So instead of a tank, like we do in Culinary, we have a reservoir. And so it has a capacity of 32 acre feet. And right now it has 6 foot fluctuation in the pond, and it's 14 feet deep. But at 6 foot fluctuation, we have a surplus of about 11.7 acre feet of water. And if you project us out to 2060, we're a little bit short. But we can just increase that fluctuation to about 7, maybe 8 feet. What that does is on a Saturday morning after a hot day, if you're the first one out to the pond's going to be lower because it's got to fill during the day to catch that pressurized irrigation that's going to be used the following night. If you show up in the evening, you won't know any difference because it's been filled up again. So we have enough capacity both in our surface waters coming from Strawberry and so forth. So then we need to look at, again, our irrigation rights to see what we have. And right now, we're looking at needing about 3,097 acre feet. And we, right now, as far as the demand, so we have a surplus of about 1,300 acre feet, so we're good there.
Where does the flood irrigation fit in this?
So we pull that out of Hobble Creek up by the Swenson Dam. It's just behind Brookside Elementary. We can get it from Hobble Creek, or we can get it from Strawberry. There's been years where Hobble Creek's been kind of gone by the end of May. And so then we're pulling the amount of water that we have out of Strawberry that we can use. We bring that and get that in and can put it into the creek and then take it back out at Swenson Dam for the flood irrigation.
Okay. And is that part of these water
Yes.
rights of
Yes.
the PI system?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have sufficient water rights there. Well, we have other rights too that we have. Basically, we have either shares or water rights that we can use. An example, in the master plan, they talk about the Platte irrigation system, that if we took that offline, which we're one of the last communities in Utah County to still do this, that we could take that water and do a change application and put it into our wells. We may not get the full 2,000 acre feet because they give a kind of a haircut on that. But we could put that into wells, and then the people that were using the Platte irrigation would have to go back to using sprinklers to do that. Tyson, how many do we have on Platte? Just a rough number. Yeah. 120 out of a whole lot of houses in Platte. So there's not very many.
So if
You
that
know
were
what,
to happen, would you buy the rights off of them? And so that, how does that work?
We would just lose them, what?
So let me explain that. First, I neglected to introduce. This is Tyson Bartlett. He's the water superintendent. He's over the water system. Next to him is Jake Nostrom. He's the assistant public works director over water and wastewater. And so they're here just listening, and also if there's any questions I don't know how to answer, they're here to back me up. So the question you had is, what do they do with their rights? Platte users do not have a right to water. They're buying water from the city that owns the right.
Oh, okay.
So it's more or less the same, and it sounds, I don't know if it's harsh. If Reams decided to quit selling bread, they could do that. the city can decide to quit selling water to these users.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that is happening right now with Plat A is the cost to maintain the system, the ditches, to deliver the water, is more than the users are paying. So they're being subsidized by the rest of the city. Eventually, we're gonna probably discontinue Plat A water. Or we can tell the users, the number of users, we're gonna take the maintenance cost to keep this going, divide it by the number of you guys, do you wanna pay that much? And all of them are gonna say, no way. So that's something that we're looking at. We've already, the Highline Ditch is another place where we actually have water that we were selling water to these people, and that one's being closed off in like 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay.
And so there's all over Utah County, because the users don't want to pay the cost of what it costs to maintain and deliver the water, they're switching over. So
Just thought they had a water right.
no, they just buy time. Yeah. Now there is some irrigation outside of Plat A. Plat A is 4th north, 4th south, 4th east, 4th west, right? Outside of that, the irrigation company, that they do flood irrigation, and there are people that do have rights. Some of those people do, not all of them. Okay, does that make sense, what we're saying there?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we talked about in this, with the Plat A, that we could change the point of diversion at the city dam and use it and put it in the PI system. City dam's all the way up the canyon. There's a little parking lot there, and there's a dam that we can pull that water out from there and get it into the PI system. Besides that, many years ago, the city was able to get almost 5,000 acre feet of additional strawberry water than what I was talking about before. It's expensive water. In about 8 years, we'll have to start paying for it. But what we're paying for it is going to be less than what we can lease it for to other communities. And so this is water that we can use in the future if we need it, or we can lease it to other people. It could go all the way to Salt Lake because they have a mechanism to get it all the way through up there now. So that's an additional amount of water that we have. So in reality, the best way to say it is Springville has lots of water. Our growth potential, we have plenty of water to get through our growth. So our PI system, we can bring it down either through Hobble Creek and get into the PI pond here. And then we stick it in a trunk line that takes it all the way out to the west side of the community, and then it's distributed through the houses. Now, this is an older map because there's a lot of houses in here now, but so basically we have about 1,500 users right now on the PI system. Is that right, Tyson? About 1,500? Yeah. This zebra colored line right here is basically where we can service with the pond up here. We can get the, was it 50 to 125 PSI is what we're doing out there? About that. Yeah, at the high school, right? If we try to get to where the new high school is here, we can get them 40, but they're actually, and you've probably seen the new complex they're building. All of that's gonna be on pressurized irrigation, but they're gonna take that 40 PSI water, put it in a little lift station to bring it up to a higher PSI, because their big, huge sprinklers need more than that when they're doing the fields and so forth.
So
But
that's
we're getting them off of
pressurized
Kone.
irrigation there.
So there will be that, to that complex of the school and the arts park there, when it's finished in 2026, it'll be all done with pressurized irrigation, except for the artificial turf on the school, the football field. So that's kind of the plan there. So once we, as we look at what we have in the community today, we look at our deficiencies that we need to take care of, we look at growth, then we formulate the projects that we need to do. And so we have various projects that we would need to do to keep the system going based on growth. And some of these are 100% impact fee eligible. And I'm showing this purple because I'm gonna go to a map now to show you where that is right here. So this is a pipeline right here that is actually gonna go in fairly soon to help some growth that we have in that area. I'm gonna go backwards here. we'll go back. So that pipeline is a 20-inch pipeline. It's about $2.25 million, and all of it is going to be impact fee eligible because it's serving growth. The whole pipeline's doing that. So that's where this project is right here, okay? But if I go back again just to look at that, there's various projects that will need to happen totaling about $11 million, and $6 million of that is going to be impact fee eligible, okay? So we'll get past this. So we've talked about now the master plans and the impact fee, IFFP, impact fee facility plan. So we've talked about what we have, what we're going to look at growth, and now we have to establish what of that can be put to growth as far as to make an impact fee. And that's called the impact fee analysis. And this is where it's critical. We need to separate the growth-related cost versus the current deficiencies in the system. Utah law says growth pays for itself and nothing else. So that's what this document's doing now for both drinking water and for pressurized irrigation, is what is the actual that we're separating out that's going to go to growth. Remember, system deficiencies are paid by the ratepayers, not by the developers that are developing. So that's critical to remember. So this is where we're looking in the next 10 years, the blue areas, where we think we're going to grow. And that's where those pipeline projects were that I showed you. Remember, this is growth, not deficiencies. And so calculating that, we look at different projects. Existing system, if we have excess capacity in the existing system that growth can use, then growth needs to pay what we paid when we put that thing in. So as an example, the 400 South pipeline that goes from the top of 4 South, where the big tanks are, all the way out to the west side of the freeway, we did in 2010. And there's excess capacity in that pipe that can serve growth in the future, about 30.5%. So we paid about $1.4 million for that pipeline, and there's 30% capacity, and so growth needs to buy into that. If they use it, they need to buy in and pay the ratepayers back for what we've already built. If we have a future pipeline that we're putting in, remember I showed you a future one, if all of that, in this case, there's a pipeline on 1000 North, 1750 West, it's 12-inch pipeline that has to go under I-15. It's going to cost $1 million. 80% of that goes to growth. The other 20% is what we need for the community, not associated with growth. There's already places out there. And so then they would be paying $645,000 of that. Again, we're separating growth-related costs versus what we're using in the city with the ratepayers. And then to do these documents is expensive, sometimes up to 6 figures. And there's, in that planning component, development, because we're planning for the future, needs to also pay for some of that. Okay? So, calculating those on the culinary side, what we've come up with, where you're looking at the sources, like a new well or whatever, the storage like tanks, distribution like the pipelines, and the planning component, we come for the indoor use of $1,256 is the impact fee. The outdoor use, meaning when they're watering outdoors, on where there's only culinary available, is $2,772. Now, I'm going to compare that with on the west side of the community for outdoor use. We did the same thing for the infrastructure, and the planning cost is less. Why is it less?
RMPI. The pressurized irrigation.
Pressurized irrigation water costs less, and we store it in ponds and not tanks. Okay, the storage component is very expensive. If you look up here, if you're using culinary water, the storage component is really high. But in this case, so what we've done in the past couple years, is we actually take the indoor use and use that all throughout the community. Then we take the cheaper outdoor use with PI, and we apply it to the whole community. So instead of charging this plus this for people that live on the east side, and indoor plus PI, we just do them all the same. The difference between this number and this number is $57,000 over the next 10 years. So we're kind of making it across the board even. And so the people on the east might pay as much as that, but if you were building on this side, you wouldn't want to pay that extra $500, $400 just because you're building on this side. So we've kind of normalized it. So we've got the indoor component plus the secondary component to give you, that's the maximum allowable impact fee, $35.97. Okay, where does that put us right now today? These are 2024 numbers, and these are the impact fees for culinary plus secondary for a total. We're at the bottom. Why are we so far at the bottom? It's really cheap for Springville to produce water. We don't filter water. If you live in Orem, they buy filtered water from Century Water Conservancy District. Up on the hill, are you entering Homestead plant there? We don't filter water because we just pull it out of wells or springs that are in the ground. So it's cheaper for us to produce water. That's why we're cheaper in this respect. The proposed impact fees are going to get us to this level here, $35.97. How do we relate with other people? Well, this is the chart, and the county average is this. So we're doing really good on this. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because this is a pretty good increase, going from $2,500 to $3,500. It's $1,000 increase in the impact fee just from looking at this plan. So let's look at that though. Remember, we're separating growth-related costs from system deficiencies, and that's critical. Growth pays for itself and nothing else. System deficiencies are paid by the ratepayers. So what that does is that gives us a balance, right? It's literally balanced in this to where growth is paying for itself and ratepayers are paying for our system. And so it's a good, and that's why we're saying, coming to the Planning Commission today, the maximum allowable based on the impact fee analysis is $3,597 for culinary plus secondary water. Okay? And that is our recommendation. Now, it's critical, and looking at the balance here, if we take away from growth and that goes down, we have to add it on the other side because the costs are the same, meaning the project still costs a certain amount of money. And if we do that, what we're doing is we're getting ourselves out of balance. Now, this is easy when you have an impact fee that's cheaper than everybody else, but we'll be coming back to you where some aren't as cheap. But the thing to remember that is if we don't let growth pay for itself, somebody still has to, right? And so what we're looking for tonight is a recommendation of this impact fee right here, $3,597 to send to the council. That's the end of my presentation.
Can you ask questions now or later?
Now,
I just have a couple questions.
Uh-huh.
One is, what happens to the money that when you lease water to another city or you sell water to another city? Where does that money go? Is it subsidizing anything?
we don't do that currently.
We don't sell water?
No, we don't sell water to other cities, but we have that almost 5,000 acre feet of water. Right now, water's going for about $358 an acre foot-ish. But as cities grow and as we look 8 years in the future when we're going to have to make that decision, we're going to have a lot of people coming to us looking for water.
Yeah.
Because we have enough water. And so I look at it as an endowment fund to where the city can use that water or can lease it, get some revenue. Where they put that is up to the city council. And we haven't really broached that with the council because we're kind of way far ahead on that still. It's out in the future. My guess is within 5 years we'll contract a water broker and start kind of put it out on KSL. No, not really. But
Yeah, right. So did you say before too long we'd have to drill another well? Did I hear you say that?
yes, and in fact the master plan says within the next 10 years we're going to be drilling another well. We already have a location for that. It's gonna be near the high school. And if you notice, our wells, and I don't know, I guess I could go back to the map here. Because that was the end of the presentation. Up here. Our wells are kind of in a line. 9th South well, 2 wells at 4th South. Can you see my cursor? 200 North well. So in this area right here, and we also have a well here at Canyon Road, and then this is the 10 South well. But you can see there's kind of an arc here. The water that's coming off the mountains at about 700 feet-ish, we get in some very good water. So this is where the new school is. The new high school is being built. Right in this area where my cursor is where we're going to be putting another well. We've already got that area reserved. And so when we need to drill a well, that's going to be the location.
We
of it.
go about 700 feet,
Yeah.
and then how many gallons a minute does that?
So the last well we built, we have actually where my cursor is now at 4 South, we have 2 different wells. Well number 1 pumps about 3,000 gallons per minute. Well number 2 pumps 4,000 gallons per minute. That's the holy grail of wells, because most wells like Saratoga Springs or even on towards the lake, they're drilling 1,500 feet deep, and they're not getting the prolific wells that we're getting where we are. When we were a little bit worried about, not worried, but people were worried about the 2 wells we have at the 4 South complex, about 9th East, just off of 4 South. Well number 1 pumps about 3,000 gallons per minute. The drawdown, when you turn a well on, it pulls the water down, right? Because the groundwater's trying to get what's being sucked out. And it's about anywhere from 8 to 12 feet of drawdown when we turn that well on. Most wells, when they turn them on, drop about 100 to 150 feet. We thought if we drove 4 South well number 2 about 300 feet away, is that going to affect well number 1? But we felt like because we have such minimal drawdown, it was going to be okay. We drilled well number 2. We turned on well number 1. When we turn on well number 2, well number 1 dropped an additional 1 foot. And well number 2 has about 10 feet of drawdown. So it's highly prolific, very good water supply that we have in Springville. Incredible.
I'm just fascinated by all of the water,
Yeah.
everything. It really fascinates me, but I would just like to say, I think you guys do an amazing job. And I appreciate the presentation, and I don't know how in Springville we can continue to have such low impact fees. I think there's no choice but to increase them a little bit.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you one more slide, how those fit in, because we're going to be coming back to you. So what we're talking about today is what's in the dark blue here, and this is the 3597, the maximum allowable. The county fee average is still higher than that. Our increase is about 43% going from 2511 to, so there's a good increase. But I need you to look at, we're going to be coming back with sewer collection. It's higher, but it's still less than the county average. Stormwater, we're still working through, but it could be very high. But we want you to look at the overall, just for now, if we add all these up here, we're getting about $17,000. We were at 12, so you're looking at everything from parks, public safety, and so forth, which is still only 5% above the county average, which means there's other people above us that have even more. But I wanted you to see this slide because we'll be coming back with the other ones. Culinary water is the easy one because, right, we're a lot lower, but we'll come back with the same presentation for sewer collections and sewer treatment, for stormwater, and for transportation. So you're going to be seeing a lot of me over the next while. Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're looking
I
for.
have a
Oh, go
I
ahead.
have a question. So, sorry I haven't had the benefit of seeing your charts and presentation, but explain to me how the pressurized irrigation, how that build out goes and how that's financed as opposed to, with all these budgets and things. Can you explain that?
So are you talking about the growth component as we're building? How is that financed?
Right. You talked about the differences in the cost and the pressurized irrigation, but is this part of this looking at building out the pressurized irrigation?
When you say building out, are you saying moving it back into the east side of the community?
Yes.
So we've looked at that already. It's been looked at. The problem with bringing it to the east side, number one, we'd have to find a storage component like Bartholomew Pond higher up in the canyon. I did suggest that we could use the shooting range, but the guys with guns don't like that. And so it becomes a storage issue. We have to have something higher to get the pressure to get us on the east side. And also, if you put in a pressurized irrigation system in your community where it's already established, you're digging all the roads up to do it, which is a huge
that's clear.
cost. So we're not looking at it now. We did a spot thing with the high school, but that's a lot of green acreage that we could have put in. The pipeline runs right by it, and so we were able to do that. And we'll look for other places like that. If, for example, someday when we dig up Plat A to go replace those 4-inch pipelines, or when we need to redo the roadways, we might put PI in there. But we won't do it until we have to dig up the roads.
That makes sense to me then.
Yeah.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Trying to get out of this. But I'll leave that slide up there.
As this is 2 legislative items, we'll have 2 public hearings. And so we'll open the first, that's on Springville Public Works requests a recommendation on the adoption of the pressurized irrigation water master plan, impact fee facilities plan, and impact fee analysis. So if you have any comment, you can just come up to the front, make sure you state your name and address, and we'll go from there.
Seeing that we don't have any participants for the hearing, I move we close the hearing.
I'll second it.
And so we have a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call vote. Ralph, would you mind starting?
Aye, Ralph Calder.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
And Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. Okay, so we will now open the public hearing for the second legislative item, which is Springville Public Works requests a recommendation on the adoption of the drinking, we need to vote on our motion first for the first one? Yeah. Okay, so before we open the second public hearing, any discussion on the first legislative item?
No, I think it was a great presentation, Brad. Thank you.
Entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to recommend adoption by the City Council of the 2024 Drinking Water Impact Fee Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis.
I will second that motion.
Oh, they're in
Are they backwards?
different order. We did the PI
did.
one first.
Yep.
Just read
Yeah,
through
we
it.
just
Yeah.
have to do the other one,
Okay.
sorry.
A motion to recommend adoption by the by the City Council of the 2024 Pressurized Irrigation Impact Fees Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second, and roll call vote. Ralph, you begin.
Ralph Calder, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
And Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. All right, so we've moved to recommend that. So we'll go on now to the second item for public hearing. Springville Public Works requests a recommendation on the adoption of the Drinking Water Master Plan, Impact Fee Facilities Plan, and Impact Fee Analysis. And we'll open the public hearing. Again, let's come to the front and state your name and address.
See that no one is approaching for the public hearing. I motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Seconded. All right, so we will do another roll call vote to close the public hearing. Ralph, you can begin.
Ralph Calder, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
And Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. All right, so now any discussion on the drinking water master plan?
I think we're good.
I'll entertain a motion.
I motion to recommend adoption by the City Council of the 2024 Drinking Water Impact Fee Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis.
I have a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call vote. Ralph, if you could begin.
Ralph Calder, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
And Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. All right, we don't have anything else on the agenda. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss or tell us about, Director Yost? Nope. Well, not having anything else,
I move we close the meeting.
we have a motion.
We'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and roll call vote to close the public meeting. If you could start for us, Ralph?
Ralph Calder, aye.
Hunter Huffman, aye.
And Anderson, aye.
Genevieve Baker, aye. There we go. Meeting